Good afternoon. Oh, you can do better than that. Come on. Good afternoon. Well, thank you so much for being here. My name is Rod Robinson. I'm CEO and founder of ConnXus. Welcome to our first annual Wealth and Empowerment Summit. We have a great lineup for you this afternoon. I'm actually probably more excited than you all are to hear some of these great speakers we have lined up for today. But first of all, I'd like to just give some recognition to our sponsors. Our lead sponsors, New Mainstream Capital Partners, Toyota. Please give them a round of applause for stepping up and supporting this great effort. Also, our contributing sponsor, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. The National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, John and Francie Pepper, Ernst & Young, Armour & Byrne, and Innova Premier LLC. So give them a round of applause. The primary objective of this summit is to provide insight, information, and knowledge on securing capital to accelerate business growth. The secondary objective is to foster the development of value-creating relationships. So you see at ConnXus, we not only pride ourselves on connecting the dots between diverse suppliers and major corporations, we also want to connect the dots between diverse entrepreneurs and financiers who see the value in the value that those entrepreneurs bring to the marketplace. This is precisely why we're here today. We simply want to create an environment to facilitate profitable connections with an X and get out of the way. I'm very fortunate to have a personal connection with an X with each of these wonderful speakers, but frankly, even with that personal connection, there never seems to be an opportunity to get the full story of the challenges and opportunities that ultimately led to their success. So I'm actually looking very much forward to sitting out in the audience like you and just hearing these great presentations. We structured the presentations to logically flow from the challenges in the minority capital markets and investors who are capitalizing on this inefficiency. To entrepreneurs who have successfully navigated these challenges but all from three very unique perspectives. The first two presenters are professional investors who clearly see the value that diverse entrepreneurs bring to the market and how that translates into superior investment returns. The next three presenters are entrepreneurs who have benefited from such investment, and our final presenter went from senior Fortune 100 executive to successful entrepreneur, moving from corporate America and acquiring what's now one of the largest minority-owned firms in the country. Our first speaker proved to be a profitable connection for ConnXus. As her name indicates, Kesha was a source of cash investment for ConnXus. You know how some people are born with the right name to fit what they do? Well, she's got that name, Kesha Cash. God just said, you're going to be a venture capitalist. Your last name is going to be Cash. Kesha is the founder and managing director of Impact America Fund, an early-stage private equity fund, venture capital firm, that invests in high-growth companies that aim to generate superior financial returns while improving the well-being of underserved communities and creating quality jobs in America. Impact America's focus sectors are health and well-being, education, and big data for good. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kesha Cash.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I consider myself, and I play in the world of impact investing. So typically I'm speaking in audiences of soft, touchy, feely do-gooders. And I tended to stand out as someone that says, hey, look, we can do good in the community, create a social return, while also generating financial returns. So I want to take time to give you a little bit about my background and what I do, but really want to open it up for questions and answers about impact investing, as I think it's a growing field and a field that everyone in this room should be aware of. Not only is it an additional source of capital that we can access, I do think that this movement is a way that we can begin to really think about transformation in the communities while we're also growing profitable businesses. So my name's Kesha Cash. Grew up in South Carolina, born in South Carolina, grew up in Orange County, California. I like to share the story that I grew up underserved or poor in Orange County. My family was on welfare, although I received a great quality education at a public high school, and I was exposed to much more than I had internally at home. First in my family to attend college, worked on Wall Street as an M&A analyst for 3 years after graduating from Berkeley with a degree in mathematics. And then after 3 years as an M&A analyst, decided that I wanted to transfer my skill set, my financial acumen to the community. So I spent the next 6 years working with really small businesses in Los Angeles, helping them grow from point A to point B. I thought I actually knew more about business coming from Wall Street than I actually did. So I knew how to crunch numbers and organize data in spreadsheets, but I knew very little about what it actually took to manage and grow a business from day to day. So I like to say I was trained on the street with real entrepreneurs doing the heavy lifting to grow their businesses. So at that time, I was essentially, without knowing it or calling it that, I was sort of a rogue, I'd say, a rogue angel, rogue VC, in that I'd raise money from advisors on Wall Street who trusted me enough with their capital, or at least wanted me to pursue this idea I had of identifying opportunities in underserved communities, providing capital, providing connections to resources to help these small businesses grow. So I did that for about 6 years, and what I realized is that these businesses needed more money than I actually had access to. So, I was able to help them raise their first $50,000 to $100,000 to get into the game, but taking a step back and realizing these companies needed much greater dollars, as well as access to networks in order to grow their businesses. So I said, hey, look, there's no lack of opportunity in underserved communities. There's no lack of ambition. There's no lack of drive. There's no lack of creativity. What's missing here? And what I identified what was missing was access to capital, as well as the network and ecosystem that one needs to effectively grow their business. So after 6 years, I attended Columbia Business School. And I went into Columbia Business School with this idea of, let me learn as much as I can about private equity and venture capital and take that back to the community. And sort of lo and behold, I learned about this emerging field called impact investing in social enterprise, where there are groups of people out there that believe that we can do both. We can invest in for-profit business models that generate financial returns, as well as have a positive impact on community. Took that knowledge, worked at Bridges Ventures in London, in the UK. They're a private equity firm, about $500 million under management, and they're investing in economic deprived areas of the UK. So I came back with that knowledge in hand, and then met my partner and investor for the last 3 years, Josh Melman, who, if he was here today, he'd say he, inherited a lot of money. He's invested a lot of money. He's lost a lot of money. He's made a lot of money. Net, he's still making investments. And the majority of those investments, what's unique about his investment appetite, the majority of those investments have been globally into companies that generate both a financial return and a social impact. So he was one of the first investors in Grameen Phone, which is now the largest cell phone provider in Bangladesh. He invested when there were no phones in the sort of emerging third world, and now we know that there are millions and millions and millions of phones there. He was also an early investor in Stonyfield Farms, and he's invested in a lot of sustainable agriculture. So I met Josh, and he says, hey, look, in our community, we know and believe that there are more diverse entrepreneurs that are out there that we're not seeing at our networking events. We're not deploying capital to, and we want to move more money to communities of color and underserved communities. If you can find deals, we can start doing the work. And that's really how Jaliyah Ventures emerged as a sub-fund of this larger global fund, Serious Change. It's about a $60 million fund that Josh manages on behalf of a ultra-high net worth individual. And that one person has invested about $60 million over the last 6 years. And one of those investments last year, we were proud to move capital into ConnXus. And we've invested in another 8 companies that not only are for-profit companies, we think will be, that are high growth opportunities, and we think will scale and exit and have, that traditional financial return, but we also screen for that second layer of impact, and ConnXus obviously has that inherent in its business model. In addition to ConnXus, we've invested in a healthy school food provider that's based in New York. They're delivering close to 20,000 meals each day to charter schools and private schools in New York City. We've invested in a company that provides lower cost communication services to inmates, and that's a really interesting story in a company there, and we think there's tremendous impact. Just a side note, the inmate phone services industry is a $1.2 billion revenue generating industry each year, which is an opportunity as well as, it gives me, nightmares at night to think about that. And so our goal is to disrupt that industry and really provide lower cost communication services so friends and family can stay in touch with their loved ones. And studies have shown the more someone actually stays in touch with their loved ones, the less likely they are to return to prison. So those are the sort of small nuances that we look for that can have really significant impact in the businesses that we invest in. So we deployed a little over $5 million over the last 6 years, probably closer to $8 or $10 million. We've made some follow-on investments, and now I am launching Impact America Fund that will continue to invest in companies like ConnXus. Our investment range is $250,000 to $500,000 for a Series Seed round, and we'll participate in Series A's and Series B. We are, I can't talk about it publicly, but I'm waiting on final confirmation for a very large institutional partner who will co-invest alongside of our deal. So there will be larger investment dollars riding alongside of our early stage deals. So I guess, what I wanted to talk more about today, that's sort of what we've been doing in a nutshell, but really impact investing and impact investing dollars as an opportunity. Our key sector focus areas for the new fund will be health and well-being, education, and big data for good. And those are pretty broad with the underlying theme. Does the company within one of these verticals not only will create a financial return, and we can talk the traditional sort of business language, and I think we're all on the same page about what that means, but does it have a significant, or will it have a significant impact on underserved communities? Will it create quality jobs in the communities, meaning a living wage where people can actually afford to feed their families? Will it have ownership structures so that employees and key stakeholders can actually have a piece of the pie if this company does well? Will this company improve the educational outcomes of low and moderate income individuals, and more specifically, kids of color? So we're looking for companies that, again, have that double bottom line approach. And taking a step back, when Josh and I launched Jolly Adventures, we launched it with this idea of let's find all the minorities that are doing good businesses, doing good work out there. There has to be minority-owned companies that are also mission-driven, that fit into the same criteria as the other 50 companies he had invested in across the globe. And so we went out with this racial lens on our investment, with our investment thesis, and we found 9 companies that fit that profile, and a lot of others that were just a little too early for our investment thesis. And interesting enough, as we made these investments and we met with co-investors, and we have great co-investors alongside of these companies, others that we'd meet with, they assumed one or two things. We were investing with this racial sort of justice lens or minority focus, and that it was charity money, and that we were giving these businesses this money because they were minorities, and they didn't necessarily have a sound business practice. So that's wrong. And then the other thing that we faced was, well, if you're investing in minority businesses, you must be investing in mom and pop shops, the corner bodega store, which those businesses need capital, and that's a great sector of microfinance emerging here in the U.S., and we're proud to collaborate and support those efforts, but that's not what we were doing. And so what we realized is that people really don't believe that there are high growth business opportunities that are owned by minority founders, and that these companies are scalable and can create attractive returns as well as impact community. People don't believe that we, as people of color, actually care enough about our communities to focus on embedding this mission into our business model. So this new fund going forward, we've intentionally taken off our racial lens to say, hey, look, we're not, exclusive to minority-owned companies. We're really looking for the best and brightest ideas that can impact underserved communities. And what I think we'll find is that the entrepreneurs, at least what we've seen over the past 3 years, and I think we'll see going forward, the entrepreneurs that have the best solutions for the pain points in underserved communities. 9 times out of 10 are entrepreneurs of color who have either grown up with those communities or have close relationships and links to those communities via their family and their history in those communities. So our goal, we have a big goal of sort of proving this out, that we can identify companies here in America that are innovative, disruptive companies with high growth potential, not necessarily looking for them to be owned by minorities, but understand that the majority of them will likely be owned by minorities, and we can achieve venture returns that are on par with the market. So that's what we're working towards. And I'd love to open it up for questions regarding the work that we're doing and or just impact investing in general. Yeah, it's a great question because initially we went out knowing that our main criteria, they had to have a mission really inherent in the business model. So if you look at the impact investing space, there are these mainstream conferences, the Social Capital conference that happens each year. There's a social venture network, and those companies that have at least $2 million in revenue can apply and be a member of this network. So there are these different sort of mission impact-oriented gatherings. But the problem is that when you attend these gatherings, there are very few people of color there. So immediately we said, oh, wow, we have to take a step back and, where do we put ourselves to identify companies that are mission-driven and for-profit companies. So we did, it's networking. It's being at events like this. It's showing up, at the Black Enterprise Conference. It's showing up in places where entrepreneurs don't necessarily self-identify themselves as mission-driven entrepreneurs. But through the nature of our work and the education that we've done, they realize, wow, I'm delivering made-from-scratch healthy school meals to majority charter schools in New York City, and 80% of these students are on free or reduced lunch. I am a mission-driven entrepreneur, and there's also a very large business opportunity for me in the future, and now there's this other form of capital who not only appreciate my business model, but they also believe in the mission of the company and they want to support the mission of the company. So a lot of networking, a lot of really educating people on this space about impact investing so that they understand the buzzwords and what the criteria really are to access that money. And I will say from ultra high net worth individuals to most of the foundations here in the U.S. to now some of the large banks are rolling out, if they have not already been participating in impact investing, they're rolling out impact investing programs. So we will begin to see more and more of these dollars labeled as impact investing dollars floating, into the community, sort of beyond affordable housing, which is important, but really looking at business models that have inherent social missions in that business. Yeah, that's a big question, and hopefully some of the speakers that will speak next who have been doing this longer than I have can give you a better answer. But that is, that's a question. And in the impact space, minority aside, it's a question as to how do we ensure that a company maintains its mission through a liquidity event, through an exit of some sort. And we're grappling with that question. If our sole purpose is to really support this company and transforming community, if a large traditional company that does things like the status quo buys our mission-driven company, will that absorb the mission or mission drift the company? So that's a great question. In the impact investing space, you're seeing alternative forms of exit strategies. I know a large family office, very large family office that's deploying hundreds of millions of dollars each year. Their new approach, recognizing, as you build mission-driven companies, where's the exit opportunity, if not to the public market or to a traditional strategic buyer. Their approach is to buy larger, to be that exit, right? A mission-focused exit, to buy a large majority stake of a company, run that company, operate that company, and then eventually sell that company back to the employees. So that's their way of expanding ownership in the community. So I think we'll start to see creative and sort of innovative ways that don't, necessarily look like the traditional exit path. Yeah, I mean, if we're doing our jobs the right way, I really think, any venture private equity player that's active should be assisting with that work. The companies that we've invested in over the last 3 years, tend to be earlier stage. We've been an early stage fund trying to figure this out. So to the extent that, we've provided as much support as we can on different levels, to your point of how do we help that company. Our goal is if we can help a company like a ConnXus and others get to a Series B round, that's my thing. If we can get them in the game, if we can get them into the game where they are attracting traditional dollars and they're raising enough money to support that growth, and obviously there are other things besides the money, then we're creating a pipeline for us of innovative companies that are disrupting sort of traditional ways of doing things. So we're very focused on that. And, we have accelerator partners, incubator partners, a large ecosystem, a large network of people that we can pull from to help with exactly what you're talking about, that capacity building piece, the team management piece, all the things that are necessary in order for a company to get from, really from A to B. Questions? We're good? Good? Okay.
Have my glasses on now. Sorry, I stumbled. So I guess one of the themes that you'll see resonating throughout the day is the importance of relationships, and that the capital's out there. You just have to know how to find it, and that's what we're hoping to do here today. At least set you on the right path and start to develop the right relationships. One of the things that is interesting about how I met Kesha, it was actually through a mutual friend that works for Google Ventures, I think, and said that knowing what ConnXus was all about and the mission of ConnXus, thought it made sense for us to connect. And I guess over 6 to 12 months after due diligence and all that good stuff, things started to fall into place. So the money's there, you just have to know how to find it. Our next speaker, Martin Chavez, is a personal friend who I've known for at least a decade. When I met Martin, he was leader of Goldman Sachs Urban Investment Group, a large private equity fund targeting diverse entrepreneurs in urban markets. At that time, I was consulting major corporations in the areas of supplier diversity and sourcing, as well as MBEs in the area of growth. After learning that Janet and Vince, my friends who you'll hear present a little bit after Martin, were on the market for outside capital, and Martin was looking for deals, there was an opportunity for me to connect the dots. So I did, and the payoff is we actually have this great story to tell, this great success story for them to share today, almost a decade later. Martin is managing partner and co-founder of New Mainstream Capital, where he is involved in all aspects of origination, execution, managing and exiting the firm's investments. It's my pleasure to introduce Martin Chavez.
Good afternoon. Oh, slides. I think I'm going to do without the slides today, but may use them here and there. But anyway, thank you, Rod, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to tell you about my firm and a little bit about my background, as well as the story. I have to thank you for squeezing me between Kesha and Janet and Vince, who I know will be fantastic presenters, which will just make me look worse, but that's what 10 years does, right? In any event, what I like to do is maybe tell you a little bit about myself, similarly as what Kesha did, and then talk about my firm, our strategy, and then open it up for questions and answers, just to provide you a perspective from a capital provider perspective. In many ways, I consider myself also an entrepreneur, even though I'm in the private equity business. And the entrepreneurial element of my background really comes from how my firm was started. But before I get into that, just by way of background, I was born in South America, in Lima, Peru. And this is how good of friends we are. I had tickets to go to the World Cup and decided to instead attend ConnXus, actually. I don't like you that much. Just kidding. I didn't have tickets, but it was David from my firm who's sitting to the right was backup. And anyway, I was an electrical engineer undergrad at the University of Michigan, so not too far from here. And then I got my MBA at Harvard and went on to work at Goldman Sachs for a number of years. I started in the mergers and acquisitions group, did that for a number of years, and then I guess it was in 2002 or so, I transitioned over to the private equity group, the merchant bank inside Goldman Sachs. Within Goldman, I was one of the two managing directors focused on an investment strategy which was historically called the Urban Investment Group. But what we really did was we invested capital back in lower middle market firms that were providing goods and services to growing demographics. Growing demographics primarily to us meant minority entrepreneurs, minority-owned businesses, aging population, businesses that target the aging population, as well as outsourcing trends in industries where there were some disruptive changes. Over the years, from I guess 2004 till about 2009, we deployed about $500 million of Goldman's balance sheet capital across a number of businesses. One of them was a company called Global Lead, and I won't steal their thunder. I will wait for them to tell us the great story, but it was obviously a very successful investment and a perfect example of what ConnXus with a big X is all about. And in the context of sort of the entrepreneurial background, before I get into what we do as a private equity firm, in late 2009, with the changes in the regulatory environment, Goldman Sachs decided to pull back from investing on balance sheet capital. So this was Goldman's balance sheet capital as opposed to third-party fund capital, institutional capital raised from the firm. And that provided us with an opportunity to raise or spin out our business. So in the context or the category of 13, 14 years of goodwill and having sort of kept my head down and done what I was supposed to do at Goldman, we approached the leadership of the firm and asked for, as you learn in Goldman Sachs, you always ask for permission to explore the possibility of acquiring our business and setting up New Mainstream Capital as an independent firm. We were given the chance to explore that transaction, and that took place about middle of 2010. We and my team got together and went out to raise capital to acquire a business, and in many ways, I think it's made me a much nicer / understanding person in the context of capital raising, because I had to go out and raise capital myself to be able to start my business. So a lot of empathy now in the context of entrepreneurs approaching us and looking to raise capital from my firm. We were fortunate that in a relatively short period of time, we were able to raise the capital needed to acquire a business from Goldman. And I guess that took place September 1st. We were done by December 1st of 2010, which was, in effect, NMS1. And basically, we'd like to say that November 30th, we shook hands and wired the money across. And the next day, we were basically doing the same thing we've been doing for 10, 12 years, but with a different business card, different address, different email address, but with 100% times more conviction and alignment with our investors in the fund. Since then, the firm has grown. We now have an office in New York, an office in Dallas. We have fully deployed and invested and harvested largely NMS1. We are currently investing out of NMS2, which is a large pool of capital that's focused on investing in lower middle market companies with a growth-oriented focus. Maybe just switching gears a little bit to what we do at NMS and what types of companies we look for and what sort of the typical deal looks like, and then we'll turn it over to questions to be helpful. New Mainstream Capital, as I said, we focus on the lower middle market. So for us, that means companies that have anywhere between on the lower end, 25 million in revenues, and on the high end, 150 to 200 million in revenues. So a bit larger than where Kesha is focused. We focus on businesses that are US-centric. We're okay with international exposure, international market exposure, but we want the business to be based in the US, headquartered in the US, and with the lion's share of the revenues coming from the US. All of our businesses have a service or service orientation. We like service-oriented businesses for a variety of reasons, including high cash flow characteristics, low capex, typically or historically faster growth rates than traditional manufacturing or more capital-intensive businesses. We focus on three distinct verticals: business services, consumer services, and healthcare service. Blank there for a minute. We are also very much focused on investing in businesses that haven't had any prior institutional ownership before. To us, that means a handful of things. First is the opportunity to have a very strong alignment of interest with the entrepreneurs or managers that we back. Typically, when you're investing in businesses that haven't had any prior institutional ownership before, there is a larger equity ownership that's preserved after our investment in the context of providing capital for the entrepreneurs to diversify to a certain extent, but more importantly, capital to grow the business going forward. And so what we look to create is a strong alignment, but also a meaningful economic ownership alongside us in the context of the next phase of the growth of the business. We also look for businesses that serve or have some sort of strong relationship with blue chip clients. In the case of obviously Global Novations, Global Lead at that time, their customers were the top 50 companies in the U.S. And that was obviously very impressive from our perspective. What resonated well was the fact that here was a relatively small company, but with a product or a service that had been vetted by large corporations that was clearly in demand. And the question really was, can we augment and enhance the management team, the resources, and invest in technology solution services to scale the business nationally and globally in their case. We're also very focused on ultimately having a clear path or visibility to transact to a strategic buyer. I want to apologize about this, but we're in the business of making money. And we believe that the opportunity that exists to ultimately exit to a strategic buyer, and I emphasize the point ultimately because we do work alongside the entrepreneurs for a long period of time to take the company to the next level, that the strategic exit from a private equity perspective provides a much more desired alternative to public markets or other types of exits, and at the same time allows us for, hopefully, and as we've observed in the past, some sort of multiple arbitrage from entry to exit. The other element that's important to us, it's, as I said, I touched on the focus around the management team and the company being founder-owned or management team-owned, is the opportunity to enhance or be able to bring resources to the transaction. We believe that capital, it really is a commodity, and it really needs to be accompanied by either strategic relationships or the ability to augment the team or to be able to execute or accelerate some sort of acquisition or strategic plan that the business has in place. And we spend a lot of time within our resources, our networks, our relationships, our operators, to figure out how we can be of assistance and help to the businesses as we deploy the capital. And that's really essential to our approach to investing. Often we'll step back in our investment committee and really ask, in addition to good management team, good market share, growth, attractive growth rates, and so forth, we'll ask ourselves, what can NMS do here? Are we just going to be a capital provider, or what are the things that we can bring to the table? And unequivocally, if all that we are is really capital, the capital provider will step back and find and assist the business in finding a better fit. And so we pride ourselves in making sure that we can be as helpful to the businesses as we like to advertise we do. Lastly, another key element of our investment theme is really to look for growth businesses. I'd like to quote a statistic that our portfolio during the recession, I guess the 08, 09, 2010 recession, grew on average organically about 12%, the top line. I don't know if that's good or bad or worse, but I think that's pretty high relative to what took place in the U.S. and certainly even in normal times. And so we think that that is a function of the thesis. We think that that's a function of the focus around finding businesses that have, what we like to say, some tailwinds. And that ranged from, just to give you a couple of examples, business in South Florida called MCCI that provided primary care physician services to the elderly. So it had sort of two components of tailwind. One was aging of the population, so over 65 and so forth, but also with following the clinic models in Florida and in Texas, so heavy Hispanic population that were very accustomed to a clinic-centric model. That business grew revenues fivefold, almost was a billion-dollar company at the time that we exited, which was sold to Humana, but it significantly benefited from those tailwinds that we described, both on the aging of the population as well as the ethnic consumer. We were also investors in a company called H2O Plus in Chicago. It was a personal care consumer products company that is a very strong following within the Asian community. That business grew its distribution points under ownership from about 1,000 to about 3,000 or so, both domestically and internationally through a combination of relationships with major customers like Disney and many very strong names, but at the same time through partnerships in many international markets, Brazil, Russia, South Korea, Turkey, and the like. And ultimately that business was sold to a Japanese company called Pola Orbis. You will talk about the global Novations story. So maybe just to give you another example before I turn it over to questions, one of our recent investments, a company called Etain Solutions. Etain is a company that does IT staffing, so they provide contingent workforce solutions to large financial and healthcare oriented companies, so banks, insurance, hospital groups. They are based in Charlotte. The business has grown 30-35% annually over the last 4 or 5 years. Continues to grow. I think we're up 40+% year to date compared to last year. They are, as I said, in the business of providing IT solutions, and sort of the tailwind here is one, the trends towards outsourcing workforce, but also the increasing demand for technology solutions. I give you that as an example just because I touched on MCCI, which is on the healthcare side, the consumer products, which is H2O, and then Etain, which we view more as a business services opportunity or investment. And all of them have sort of this underlying thesis of growth driven by strong fundamentals, organic fundamentals in the industry. So that's a little bit about NMS. A couple of questions that I think I may be asked. One is we typically invest anywhere between, on the low end, $10 million to about $40-ish million of equity per transaction. We certainly can look to invest initially $10 million and then deploy more capital as needed. We are also relatively patient investors. Our investment horizons anywhere between 4 to 6 years, although our preference is to be on the shorter end of that spectrum, but we're realistic that things take time to execute. But we will exit. I know there was a question with respect to the tension that exists. And I guess maybe, I know that question wasn't asked of me, but I'll answer it anyway. I think the way we think about investing, again, is one where we want to, we will never acquire 100% of a business. We're always looking to either acquire control or close to control or slightly over control. And in doing so, our hope is that we provide meaningful liquidity to the management team shareholders so they can personally diversify. In my view, a lot of people are concerned about, you're putting a lot of money in someone's pocket. If you're picking the right partner, I actually believe that partner will sleep much better at night and be much more focused the next day. And that's what we try to do. We try to remove all the fears, all the insecurity that exists with, should I take that strategy, should I acquire that company, because my entire net worth is attached to this. We'll remove that equation, put the money aside, let's be 50-50, 60-40 partners. Let's not focus exclusively on the business. Let's do what's right for the business. And our hope is that in 3 to 5 years, 4 to 6 years, the amount of equity that you roll alongside us is worth 3-4 times what you rolled. And in many instances, we've been successful in doing so. And believe that that's part of our magic and our approach to investing with partners. So hopefully that gives you a good sense for what we do, how we do it, but I'll be happy to take any questions and answer any questions you may have. And I hope you like the slides. Any questions? Yeah. Sure. No, good questions. Yes and yes. We obviously, we back management teams. People have a lot of vision. What we typically like to say is that we come in and help the leadership, the visionaries of the business, get support and leverage. What we will do is bring a very objective perspective as it relates to, okay, do you have the right infrastructure in place? What else do you need? Do you need a controller? Do you need a VP of finance? How are your systems? Again, and it all ties to the fact that ultimately we want to sell to a strategic buyer, right? Trust me, the types of businesses we invest in cannot withstand the scrutiny of a strategic buyer, and that's not critical. That's actually what I view as opportunity. That's how we make our money. Janet and Vince will talk about it. When we first invested, there's no way that Korn Ferry would have been able to turn them upside down like they did when we ultimately exited. So there's a fair amount of resource assessment that goes in place prior to our investing. We want to make sure that that we have a good feel for what we're going to get ourselves into. There's also a lot of dialogue around, is there buying into what we are proposing and suggesting? Because once you fire the money across, you're married. That's it. It's an expensive breakup. So we spend a lot of time up front to diligence that question. We put in place those processes, systems, resources, and not to sound formulaic, but it's pretty methodical and it's pretty repetitive in terms of what we do. Like every business, I look at our business as I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurial. Right? If we want to grow and we want to be successful, we need to have it down to a science. We need to be able to scale it and replicate it. And so it's very repetitive in terms of the types of things that are needed for the types of opportunities that we look for. But then there's a handful of, with that contribution or support of resources, then we do seek and work very closely together with the entrepreneurs as it relates to, okay, now that all the nuts and bolts have been addressed, what are the 2 or 3 things that you need to do to ultimately get to the next level? I won't pick on GN because they'll do it, but in the case of MCCI, for example, when we invested in GN, it was very clear that they needed IT support, they needed a VP of finance, and they needed some sort of compliance individual to come in. They were doing it right, but they all needed to be buttoned up. But the strategic issues were, one, they needed to diversify their customers. They had a large concentration with one insurance provider. And then 2, they were primarily focused in South Florida. So the strategy was to diversify our customer base and grow into what you're providing to this particular insurance provider. Let's do it across 5, 6, 7, 8 different providers. And it's great that you can do it in South Florida, but no one's going to pay us a premium multiple. This is not going to be best of class unless you can grow it outside the South Florida market. We grew it to North Florida, Jacksonville, and then into Texas, Corpus Christi, and San Antonio. And that was part of the strategy from day one. As part of that strategy, some of it was done organically, and this is a company that largely grew organically, but we made 2 successful acquisitions, one in North Florida and then one in North Florida and then a couple of smaller ones. And that was a transaction that we were intimately involved with in the context of acquisition and M&A. Not only sourcing the business, but through the diligence, clearly execution of the documentation, and as important in that case, financing. We actually closed on that deal December of 2008, where a lot of things don't get closed, except for if you were in my case, you bought a house in December of 2008, which is not a good investment. That's fine. So long way of answering yes to both, but with some color. Hopefully that was helpful. Anything else? Any other questions? No? All right, letting me off easy here. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Let's give it up for our first 2 speakers. What a great presentations. So Martine has set the stage well for our next 2 presenters, Janet and Vince. Although I count both Janet and Vince as role models, mentors, I've never really gotten a chance to hear their pre-2005 history. So even for me, this will be a great treat to just kind of hear their journey from taking on an investment from New Mainstream or Goldman and moving all the way through to exit to where they are now. So Janet and Vince were founding partners, as you know, of Global Novations, a full-service management and talent organization serving Fortune 500 companies around the world. Global Novations grew to be the largest diversity and inclusion company in the United States through organic growth and acquisitions funded by Goldman Sachs and New Mainstream Capital. Global Novations was acquired by Korn Ferry International, and I can't wait to hear the details of that, but ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Janet Reid and Vincent Brown.
All right, excellent. Well, we are really happy to be here. We know that in the room there are a number of entrepreneurs as well as venture capitalists. So we heard from two of the greatest venture capitalists, but I also want to share with you the other side of the story. So many have heard our story, those that are here in this community, and it's a wonderful story of a business that started so humbly and then grew, and eventually we sold, and we're all on the other side, and isn't it glorious? Well, it is glorious, but it also has many different aspects to it. So what Vincent and I are going to do is tell the real deal Holyfield about what it is like to go from where many of you are, and certainly where we are, to where it is that we are today. Is it up here? This advances slides? Oh. Miracles. All right. So we had some inspiration. Certainly, many of you know the story of South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was transformative, as we all know. But the way he transformed South Africa was through the concept of truth and reconciliation. There were times when there were fights, and then there were times to reconcile things and get to a better place. So that is certainly our story as well, and you'll hear that all through, the struggles and the struggles and reconciliations. It was so inspirational to us that Vincent and I together authored, this was our first book that we authored, called The Phoenix Principles, and many know that analogy too, starting from the beginning, going through flames, and rising again in a different place. So as we go through, you will hear these stories over and over and over again. But our transformation began with both of us being in the corporate arena, and actually there's a third founder, Samuel Lynch, who is not here today. My roots began with Procter & Gamble, and Vince and Sam with household finance. And usually in a corporate setting, people either leave a corporation to start a company because they can't stand where they are and they're running like the Dickens, swearing they'll never work for anybody again, or they think they know so much from being in such a great corporation that they can go start their own. I won't ask for a showing of hands on which side you're on, but I bet you most of you, well, it's probably about half and half. And for me, coming from P&G, it was really a desire to start a company thinking that I have run one, so, I ran Sunny Delight, so I should know, how to run a business. Vincent and Sam, a little bit different story. So we'll go back and forth and talk about our stories. So what I'd like to do is get into it with our humble beginnings.
Thanks, Janet. One of the things you'll see is we're going to be sharing the mic, but it'll be a fight.
We've been together for many years.
Exactly. So let me just kind of begin. And first of all, I think as I think about being here, first of all, thank you for letting us be here. Rod, thank you for having this event. And I think about our beginnings being really the pavilion of courage. When you start talking about starting your own business and starting from the beginning, I'm looking at Cliff, and we were together. We both had afros at the time. When you start a business, you have this dream, this passion, And ours started on 2542 Woodburn Avenue, for those of you who know what it is. But Woodburn has been redeveloped since then. It didn't look like that when we were there. In fact, it was a storefront. Next door was Tom's Chicken, and we would sit outside at the end of the day of a good day and actually think about what we might want to do and go get a piece of chicken at the end of the day. So we had this vision, and I remember very clearly that we talked about the idea of one day, and actually I think it was a dream versus a vision, because I think there's a little difference between the two. I think a vision is something you can actualize. I think a dream is something many of us have. Sam and I had a dream, and that dream was one day we'd have a big business. We'd be working all around the world. We'd be doing all these great things. That's what our dream was. But it's a long way to get from the dream to the exit. So I'll tell you right now, we're real humble. I'm going to share just a few key things with you. But we learned along the way. And I think one of the things that Rod said that I will tell you that's most important on our journey has been the importance of relationships. Our business was consulting. No question we had to be best in class at it. But the fact of the matter is, relationships are what fueled us throughout our entire business process. And I can go through every connection we have with an X, right, and point out where relationships made the difference for our success. And so one of the things that I'll have you look at is we were a whole lot of different companies before we became Global Novations. Change and transformation. In the center circle, that's when we were either Lynch Brown and Associates or J.B. Reid and Associates. And I don't know about you, but I had to have a card with my name on it, okay? And I really wanted to be able to say I was president and CEO of two people. But it was so important for me to be president and CEO because I had left somewhere where I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to lead or do the best that I could do. So that was real important to us. What the key point I want you to think about for us is what I call our Phoenix moment, when we really were able to transform and go from the vision of a Lynch Brown or a J.B. Reid. A couple of key things happened. If you look down there where it says LBA, J.B. Reid. One time we were meeting with Procter & Gamble. Janet was from Procter & Gamble. Ed, you'll appreciate this a lot because they teach you how to brand yourself very well. And I never will forget Gibby Carey looked at us and said, now what company are you today? Are you J.B. Reid or are you LBA? Because we really hadn't come together on who we were. We knew what we wanted to do, but we were just really kind of consulting. We hadn't come up with clarity and clear purpose. We were doing a little bit of work. So we went away from that, and then we really started to go through a strategy and brainstorming process. And really, basically, Janet led the process, quite frankly, and it was, what do we want to be? We said we wanted to be global, and where do we want to be positioned? We said we want to lead. And it was that conversation that began to get the clarity on who we were and what we wanted to be. So when you look at number 5, that's when we went outside of who we were to where we could start thinking about who we wanted to become. And I say that because, you know, for 30 years, this business was all I did. It was my child. It was longer than my wife's been married, longer than any children that I have. I mean, it has become a core of who I am. So it was real important to make that transition from being kind of the owner-centered to being able to think in a vision. Janet, any?
Nope. Keep going.
Okay, so far I'm going okay. So there we were. Now, one of the things I'll tell you is that Sam and I thought we were really pretty smart. We were, because we got really smart when Janet joined us. Quite frankly, it made a big difference, and I'll tell you why. The IRS was coming after us. No, okay. That's a true story. You know your business ain't going well when your postage meter gets repossessed. Postage meter.
They didn't tell me that, though.
Yeah, we made her fall in love with us first, with the vision and where we were going to go, right? Oh, Janet, we can do all these things. Oh, by the way, we can't pay the postage meter, but don't worry about that. But my point is this. There are a lot of things that happen, and the reason I think we were able to grow our business, quite frankly, at least for me, is that we had some amazing partners. We collaborated, but let me tell you, that's one of those fake family pictures where everybody just smiling and all getting along. It was nothing like that. Folks, we fought, we hollered, we screamed, we came up with new ideas, we challenged each other in unbelievable ways. But we were still all focused on the mission, and we always were focused on the end result. But I got to tell you, there were some legendary battles between how we thought about the business and what we should do. And I think one of the biggest battles was when Janet edited all of my paperwork. That was just, she had still doing it. Red ink, more red ink on it than you can imagine.
So, Vince, you might want to say, actually, Lynch Brown and Associates existed first. And then when I left Procter & Gamble and started J.B. Reid and Associates, that's when we connected up together. So that's when we wound up with one company with two names. And actually, the irony of it is when we both came together to begin talking about working together, we met actually we knew each other before, but we got together on Fountain Square at a Ku Klux Klan rally. And after the rally, we were out there with our Bibles, preaching togetherness, and they were out there burning up stuff and all that. And after we got through with the rally, we decided to go eat chicken and grits together. And that's when we began talking about it. So that's how we started with one company with two names. Who you see here is Oris Stewart on the left. Oris was the last partner to join us. He came because he was a good friend of the guy sitting down next to me, whose name is John Peoples. I recruited John Peoples out of Procter & Gamble. So John Peoples and I worked together. He brought in Oris, and Vincent and Sam are the other two that you see there. It was a nice picture, but it was an ugly process. It was making sausage for sure. You want to go on, Vince?
Yeah. So one of the things we did what'd you say?
I said,
okay.
Hurry up.
Oh, thank you. So one of the things that we did real clearly was get clear on what our vision would be, what our mission would be. And it really was to become the world's leader in terms of diversity and inclusion, but then really beyond that, in terms of management consulting services. We really wanted to see ourselves and saw ourselves as much bigger than that with much more opportunity. So it was very important for us to get very clear. Also, our values, our mission, and things of that nature. And one of the things I'll tell you is that we were very excited because we did have an opportunity to work with companies all over the world. So for here, I'll just tell you just a couple of key things that for us. One, there was a greater power. I know this is a finance meeting, right? And we're talking about finances and those kind of things. Very, very important. But I'll tell you, there was a greater power in the process for us. There were some decisions that got made that we were very, very lucky in. There were some times when we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, who was going to be able to help us next, and it happened. So we believe, at least for us, maybe not your journey, there was, in fact, a greater power in play. Tons of storms, tons of times when things weren't going exactly the way that you would want them to be on the business plan, the business model. All looks good on paper until you put it in front of people, until you try to get the client that you've been working hard with, and all of a sudden they decide that they're no longer going to be your client. They're upset. I mean, a lot of different things are happening along the way. One has to be very, to persevere. I also want to say you got to be lucky sometimes. This is Leon Bull Durham. And the reason I say that is that one of the reasons we had the ability to even exist as a client, because this was a gentleman that came in early stage in our business, kind of an angel customer, if there's such a thing. Not an angel investor, but an angel customer. And he enabled us to really do some of our early services as a result of that. At that time, he was on the Sports Illustrated cover. Tons of people along the way, just so many names, everyone with a story. Senator William F. Bowen, for example. One day we were crying about not having business. And he said, "When's the last time you've been up to the state of Ohio?" Instead of just crying. Like, whoa. So we got up there, and all of a sudden business started to happen. Those were the kinds of real conversations that actually would happen along the way. I remember Ross Love helping us to think about how we could reposition our business and reposition our brand, well above and beyond just the work that we were doing, but really was coaching and mentoring and guiding us along the way. Dr. Lynn Schlesinger, for example, at the Limited Brands, we built a relationship and rapport with him. We would sit down with him on a quarterly basis, and he would challenge and destroy our business model. He would just tear it up.
He was a customer.
And he was a customer. And we're sitting there talking to him about our business. He's saying, this isn't going to work, that's not going to work. We're like, whoa, you gonna send it? You can still write that check, though, right? I mean, we're letting you inside. I mean, this ain't going to be the end of it, is it? But, I mean, it was just like that in terms of building relationships, learning and growing throughout the way. And it could go on. And, of course, having family, friends to be supportive throughout the process, very, 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 very helpful. And, oh, by the way, that picture, who I know many of you all know, just as a side, Leon Durham actually owns the original one. And as part of our process, we actually had the first 1 and 2 that were ever actually done. That's Gilbert Young. Long story short, Martine mentioned this. One of the things along the way that we were very, very excited about is we had amazing customers and clients. If you take a look at the global companies that we had a chance to work with, they are the best of the best. But here's what I will tell you. We organized them in that way because all of them had a different culture, a process, a different way to do work. And even though we had specific services, it was critical for us to be able to share our services in a way that they could hear them. So it wasn't just us taking one product. We had to custom and tailor and refit to make sure that that would actually work for each of them. The other thing I will share with you is that we got a lot of feedback along the way from our people and from our clients. The feedback is ultimately where we always came up with our newest, greatest idea. I never will forget one time one of our clients, Luxottica, was saying, this is great, but we can't afford to have you all continue to come and train 3 days in a row. You got to come up with something better. We like the content. We were one of the first to create an e-learning, and we piloted it with them.
We were the first in diversity.
And in diversity. Thank you, Dr. Reid. We were the first. And so it's that whole idea around feedback being so important to us that really helped us to grow along the way. I already talked about the importance